Let's talk about Illumination Entertainment. You've all heard of them. They make the Minions, the Sings, the Despicable Me's, the Slops, and the rest. While their movies almost always make a lot of money, they also tend to get middling critical reception and next to no prestige or award recognition, and it's not hard to see why. Out of all the major Western animation studios, their output is the most babyish. You know, that wacky, slapstick, pop culture reference, gross out humor, four-quadrant appeal, non-challenging worldwide box office successy vibe, a tone that is publicly and infamously by design. A studio founder, Chris Melodrani, has said on record that the studio's ethos is to make cheaper films with wider appeal than their competitors. It should come to the surprise of nobody that, to those who want the animation industry to be healthy and respected and thought of as maturely as live action, Illumination is basically public enemy number one. While films like Into the Spider-Verse and Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio show that animation can tell mature and polished stories for all ages, Illumination is making double the money with these toddler movies that don't utilize the strengths of the medium at all. Now, I don't think the studio is all terrible. The original Despicable Me is honestly a classic, and I really enjoyed the Mario movie. I think this is a hot take, but I like Minions. I think they're overhated and can be endearing in small doses. The Minion Cafe at Universal Studios Florida isn't just good, it's orgasmic, but that's about it. And I watched most of their movies ahead of this video just so I wouldn't be parroting thoughts on movies I hadn't seen. For the most part, the studio is very held back by its mission statement, and I don't think the reputation it's earned has been unwarranted. Or has it? As of recently, the image of Illumination Entertainment has begun to shift, not necessarily because of the movies themselves, as they've remained pretty consistent in their quality. No, people have started looking more favorably at Illumination because of their actions. In 2022, the marketing for Minions: The Rise of Gru pointedly made fun of NFTs. In 2024, the marketing for Despicable Me 3 pointedly made fun of AI, and later, cinematic universes. Three fads that most other studios have been embracing to the chagrin of people with souls. It's neat, but they are just ads. Taking potshots at popular trends is cool, but not particularly revolutionary. Give me something with sauce. Oh, the director of Despicable Me 4 responded to the question of if the series will ever go into live action with a "God, I hope not." That's pretty funny. That's basically it, by the way. Not really that much in the grand scheme of things, just a few memorable instances of studio higher-ups decidedly standing against crappy tech and Hollywood trends. However, it's been just enough to shift the tide of discussions on the studio within the animation communities I follow on YouTube and Twitter. A bit of a lighthearted, perhaps I've treated you too harshly sentiment with some slight reevaluation of their previous works thrown in as well. Doesn't mean that Illumination is now based, actually? Well, maybe. It's at least caused me to reevaluate how I view these animation studios and the good and bad that comes from them. Let's look at Sony Pictures Animation, for example. They used to be in what I'd consider a tier below even Illumination, with the most bottom-of-the-barrel kids slop imaginable, but they really managed to turn themselves around. From a quality perspective. Internally, not so much. So it's kind of hard for me to unilaterally throw my support behind their operation when said good quality films come in spite of widespread mismanagement and crunch. I love a good maximalist approach movie, and I understand that all creative endeavors are going to involve a lot of hard work, often which is voluntary. There's a difference between usual hard work and mismanaged hard work though, and Lord and Miller are infamous for their haphazard production cycle. Key sequences were added weeks before the movie came out, last-minute scripting and story changes would force the animators to redo completed material. The animators were reportedly working 11-hour days, 7 days a week, for an entire year, which is unsustainable from an artist perspective and even from a business perspective. It made Lord and Miller's oustings from works like Solo feel less like a case of Lucasfilm's cynicism and more like a case of their directing styles being a long-term liability. As much as I love these films, as much as they brought joy to millions of people, I don't think any commercial product is worth throwing this many people into the grinder for, because it is still a commercial product at the end of the day. Illumination, for all of their flaws, fully understands this when creating their films. I'm not going to pretend I know literally anything about the French animation industry. I did some cursory research and found mixed reception. You aren't paid as well as animators in the US, and there are no unions to speak of, but the country's intermittent system does give more secure revenue for such an uneven job, and And in the case of Illumination specifically, they seem to have solid, if not few, Glassdoor reviews, with the overall consensus being that their pay isn't high, but the working conditions are decent, generally. Now, I wouldn't put too much stake into this. It wouldn't surprise me at all if a terrible Sony-esque working conditions at Illumination story drops in the trades tomorrow. I'm more so looking at the studio's ethos from a general perspective in terms of what the studios tend to prioritize. Right there in that NYT interview I alluded to earlier, Melodrani states, "Very few management layers, clear decision making, shortening the length of time you spend developing a movie. It can be done." I do think that ethos reflects in their output. They don't produce story-heavy movies that require rewrites or retooling. They don't produce boundary-breaking animation styles that need to be developed and tested. I'm not going to knock the skills of the animators themselves, as most Illumination movies do look nice and even have one or two art style shift sequences to mix things up. It's just that the seeming lack of auteurism, ego, or as some may call it, vision, does seem to result in a much more traditional work environment than the Working Dead crunch cults that many animation studios and effect houses have turned into. While I'm not going to say that movies with effort can't have proper working conditions and development cycles, I do have trouble faulting a studio for not putting in that extra effort to maintain something cleaner and less expensive. Especially when, as mediocre as their formula tends to be, it's one that can work in specific circumstances suited to it. I think the action sequences in the Mario movie are cartoony and well directed. I think the Minions' slapsticky hijinks can be creative and funny in small doses. I don't like the Sing movies, but their musical performances are pretty creatively presented. Embarrassingly, the first Sing is how I got introduced to the music of Elton John. I know, I'm a fake gay person, don't tell anyone. My point is, if the worst thing to come from a studio isn't human suffering, but mediocre kids movies that make money, I'm not going to care that much. Human suffering hurts the industry way more than mediocrity. That doesn't mean we can't criticize mediocrity. I'm going to be honest, the Illumination Grinch movie and The Secret Life of Pets 2 are probably some of the worst and most banal kids movies I've ever seen. They're not exactly stimulating young minds or inspiring passion in the art form with products so cynically conceived to return in syndication or sell toys. The capitalist money-grubby side of the corporation is definitely worth criticizing, but it's also less unique of a problem than some people make it out to be. Oh, Illumination outright states that their ethos is to make movies that get high profit margins? How dare they? Disney and Pixar would never publicly state that they make movies just to get high profit margins. They just privately think that and publicly pretend to be your good nostalgic buddy pal who loves continuing the magic and blah 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 blah. Yeah, no. All studios are like this. Illumination may be a more extreme case, with their emphasis on production budgets being low and marketing budgets being high, but outside of maybe Pixar's 2000s lineup or a bunch of overseas international studios, you'd be hard-pressed to find any mainstream animated movie from the past 20 to 30 years where profit wasn't the impetus for its existence. You think Sony didn't greenlight Spider-Verse to sell 1 million Spider-Man action figures? You think Disney greenlights new musicals because they think it's good for the arts and not because the Disney Princess brand is one of the biggest on planet Earth? There are obviously extremely talented artists who take these products and turn them into art, sometimes even into amazing art, masterpieces even. But don't get it twisted, Pixar is just as hung up on making a profit as Illumination. Even on the rare times where they're ambitious and do something new, if said ambition performs even a little bit below expectations, the corporation is going to throw it out in favor of quote-unquote universal stories that speak to the commonality of experience, like Toy Story 5, Incredibles 3, Minions 3, Sing 3, The Secret Life of Pets. You get my point. The difference between Illumination and the rest of mainstream animation isn't that they're more focused on profit than art, it's that they're more honest about being focused on profit than art. It makes me sad because I don't think these studios were always like this. Early Pixar was full of risks that changed the shape of animation. The Disney Renaissance is called that for a reason. It basically revived a medium that was dying by creating some of the best works of art imaginable. Even these times had their crazy politics. Not to sound like every other video essay lady ever, but you should read Disney War, it's really interesting. I don't think we're in a particularly good time for animation as a medium right now. There's a lot of great indie and international stuff coming out, and Disney or Pixar can occasionally pop out a genuine classic, but when looking at the industry as a whole, if you haven't been laid off, you're probably either being mismanaged, forced to work on slop, or both. So given the alternatives, examples of quality products that harmed the artists making them, and inconsistent products from a company that pretends to be your friend to shield that they want your money, I honestly don't have much of an issue with Illumination's "we're just here to make money with popular family movies" strategy. It's very old-fashioned 1980s Hollywood, like that famous quote of Michael Eisner saying they have no obligation to make art, but sometimes when making money, you will create culture and you will create art. Again, even as the Disney Renaissance was changing the landscape of pop culture, the CEO of Disney was saying that art was secondary to profit. So to answer the question posed by the video's title, no, Illumination isn't based actually. I don't even really like the majority of their movies. But in terms of Illumination being the villain of animation, I honestly think that's a bit silly too. Argue all you want that they're harming the reputation of the animation industry with their low-quality baby movies, but low-quality baby movies are inevitable as long as babies exist to be sold low-quality mush. If this is our most famous supplier of low-quality baby movies, I honestly think it could be much worse. Sorry if this makes me sound like one of those Twitter accounts that post pictures of the Mario movie to insist that animation is cinema. I don't agree with those accounts. Animation's good, but it's juvenile to insist that kids' movies not being given Oscars is indicative of wider disrespect. In fact, I think animation is not cinema. Today I'll be giving a shout out to my patrons at the producer tier and above, those being Ace L, Alicia Stella, Kira, Freya, Joy Content, Oliver Corcoran, Sam, Vincent Coates, and Yensid. With that said, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all later.